everybody, it's Kelsee Briana J, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a review, a demo, and comparisons of the brand new Pat McGrath Mothership 6 Midnight Sun eyeshadow palette. And you all know I stand for Pat McGrath, so whenever she launches a Mothership palette or pretty much anything, I purchase it. So I jumped at the chance to be able to get this palette on her website. It launched just a little bit early, so I placed my order and I have this baby in my hands. And so today we are going to play, but before we get into that, I want to give you guys some details about this palette and walk you through it. So let's go ahead and jump into it because I'm too excited to hesitate any further. Here's what the packaging looks like. Pat McGrath always brings it with her art, and this one is no exception. So this one has this really beautiful imagery. It has purple roses, it's golden, it looks highly decadent. Very on brand for Pat McGrath. This palette retails for $125, just like the other Mothership palettes. So this one is no different. This one again has 10 shades of eyeshadow. So in each pan, there's 1.32 grams of products for a total weight of 13.2 grams of products in the entire palette. So here's what the Midnight Sun palette looks like. It's the same type packaging that Pat McGrath's other Mothership palettes have, the larger ones have, and I think this one is really cool because the name, especially Midnight Sun, at first I thought that was an oxymoron because it's like the sun doesn't come out at midnight. So I researched what a midnight sun actually was, and it says that it is a natural phenomenon that occurs in summer months in places north of the Arctic Circle or south of the Antarctic Circle. So I thought that that was really cool. I had never even heard of a midnight sun. Leave it up to Auntie Pat to give me a geographic lesson as well as be serving us eyeshadow. So here's the inside of the palette, and as per usual, this palette is super heavy. Pat McGrath is the queen of aesthetics, so she's giving us a look. And in this palette there's a mix of finishes. So there's 3 matte eyeshadows, 3 shimmers, and then we have the 4 dazzlers as per usual. So the dazzlers are those extra special eyeshadows that are super glittery, but at the same time they're finely milled and they give you that really pretty reflect on the lid or wherever you choose to use them. Pat McGrath actually said that this eyeshadow palette has 7 different formulas in it, and on her website she goes into a little bit more detail of that. She actually has this interactive section under this palette to where each shade you can see like the different finish of it and the description of the color, and it looks like moons and you can scroll through. She is just the queen of creativity. I love Pat McGrath, so I thought that was a really cool touch that she added onto her website for you all to explore a little bit more about this palette. So this palette definitely has a fall aesthetic because it has the warm tones, we have the rustic tones, it has a pop of purple in here. Also, something that I really liked that she did on her website was underneath this palette's link, she gave us inspiration for what she drew from to create this palette. That really gave me a sense of better understanding about where she was going with this palette. The inspiration for this palette was pretty retro in my opinion. She had images of Grace Jones, she had an image of a lady who I'm not sure who she is, but she looks like she was pulled straight out of the 70s, and that is a compliment. The disco era. It's very glam, it's very terrestrial. It has like astrological vibes, astrology vibes here because we have the moons and we have the purple, and I feel a bit of the Renaissance was thrown into this with a little bit of the Sistine Chapel. A lot of resources were pulled from to create this palette. So let me read you guys the description that she stated. It says, revel in nocturnal surrealism with 10 opulent hues that conjure the divinity of the midnight sun. So I'm excited about it, and I'm excited to show you guys how to create this look. I actually did do comparisons to other palettes that I have from Pat McGrath, and I want to show you guys the similarities and the differences of other colors that she's already launched, but I will do that at the end of the video. And if you want to see swatches of the palette, I will also have that at the end of the video. So stay tuned. I'll show you guys this look, and then I will give you all my final thoughts about this palette. Enjoy! So I have concealer on my eyes, and I'm going to use that as my eyeshadow base. And I'm first going to take a fluffy brush. This is a Rephr P07f brush, and I'm first going to take the color Taboo. I am first going to run this color back and forth in my crease and begin to gradually build this color up. So Pat McGrath eyeshadows are really pigmented, so just go in with just a little bit at first and then go in and buff it out. But this is going to be in my crease and buffed up to be my transition color. Same brush, and I'm going to lightly dip into Extreme Dusk. I am going to take this color right on the outer crease, and I'm not going to blend it up. I am using the lightest pressure point with the tiniest amount of this color just to further define my crease. And I already buffed out the other colors, so I don't need to buff this one out. So I am just going to concentrate this color here and then gradually bring it in. So very light-handedly, like as you all can see, I'm holding my brush basically at the bottom, and by doing that I am weakening the pressure that I am putting on this brush, thus creating a softer look. Because if you all can tell, this eyeshadow is super pigmented, and even with me pressing light, it still is showing up heavy. So be very light-handed and careful with that. Next, I'm going into a more compact brush. It's a little bit smaller, but it still has a blending element to it. This is the Sonia G Worker Pro brush, and I'm going to dip into the color Vermilion Venom. I want this color right on the very outer corner, so I'm going to concentrate that color there and gradually build it up and begin to bring it over to the lid. I'm not going to take it all the way over. I am going to stop this color about here, and then I am just going to pack it up to the crease. I'm not taking it in the crease, I am just meeting it directly there. Now I'm going to take a flat shader brush. This is a Sonia G Builder Pro brush, and I'm going to dip into the color Skin Show Moon Glow and pop that right on the inner corner. On to some of my favorites in the Big Mothership palettes, the last four. I'm going to take the same brush and go into the color Astral Solstice. Carefully, I'm going to press this color in the space that I left open, and without any additional adhesives, without spraying anything, you get this beautiful, glittery, almost ethereal type shine. So I am just going to continue to pack this on, and I want this to be pretty opaque, but it doesn't have to be completely opaque. A little bit of my skin can show through. I'm just going to tap this next to this outer corner color. I'm tapping it up to the crease. I'm tapping it next to the inner tear ducts color, and I'm just diffusing it to where it just looks like a beautiful star, like stardust. Now let's do the lower lash line. I love the way that the top of my lid is looking, super pretty. So I'm going to go in with the pencil brush. This is an Esom S31. Let's pick up Astral Moon Glow again and wrap it around and put it on the lower inner corner. And on the rest of the lower lash line, I'm going to take the same brush and the color Wicked Envy. All the way across. So here's my finished look using the Midnight Sun eyeshadow palette. So I thoroughly enjoyed using this palette. As per usual, Pat McGrath brings great quality to her eyeshadow palettes, and I love the way that my look turned out. I think that it is very sultry, very beautiful, and it's neutrals, but it's not a boring palette by any means. And I really like the way that I created this really smoky look, but at the same time, I could pull it back just a bit and get a natural everyday type look. The color story of my eyeshadow look today is not something that I would typically put together. I felt inspired to create this look because the colors were next to each other in that manner in the palette. So sometimes when you see colors next to each other, you get a little bit of inspiration, and it makes you want to try different things, and that's how I feel about this palette. So my eyeshadow look is neutral, but it's still a little bit more out of the box. So I'm here for that. As I talked about in the beginning of the video, I want to talk to you guys about some comparisons to this palette. starting with the Anastasia Beverly Hills X Makeup by Mario eyeshadow palette that was limited edition. It came out such a long time ago, but I know a lot of you all still have that palette in your collection. And I feel like the color stories of both of these palettes are very similar. They're not dupes for one another because I do feel like the Midnight Sun palette is just a little bit more edged out because the colors in there are a bit more vibrant. They're not as subdued. And I think that the glitter really sets it apart and makes it a little bit more sexy in comparison to the Makeup by Mario palette. But the color story is very similar. There are key differences to each of the palettes, but if you are a fan of the Makeup by Mario palette and you're also a fan of Pat McGrath's eyeshadow palettes, then you will definitely enjoy this palette. As far as looking for comparisons or dupes across Pat McGrath's line, there are a lot of colors that she has already given us that are similar to some of the colors in the Midnight Sun palette. Especially in these first 4 colors, there's a lot of colors that look like these that are in her line. And I don't have a dupe for this purple color that's in this palette, but Pat does give us purple a lot. She is a big fan of purple, as am I. There are similarities across some of the other shades that are in this palette as well. I took my time and I went through all of my Pat McGrath eyeshadow palettes and the singles to swatch them all to show you guys the comparisons, and you'll see there are subtle differences in some of the shades, and some of the shades that I thought would be a little bit closer, there's not really a lot of similarity there. To me, this color right here is the most unique out of the entire palette because I don't have a lot of colors like that in my collection, period. The closest shade that I could think of that was similar to that was one by Urban Decay. Urban Decay has a formula called Moon Dust, and even still then, the color is similar, but the intensity of it just does not hold a candle to Pat McGrath's intensity, and I have that color on my lid now. But I'll go ahead and insert the swatches of the comparisons. So I hope that those comparisons were helpful in your decision-making process on if you want to purchase this palette or not. For me, like I said, I love the formulation of Pat McGrath's eyeshadow palettes, especially the larger Mothership eyeshadow palettes, and I am a collector. So I have to have every single one in my collection at this point because I'm obsessed with them. I love them, and even though I feel as if this one is not the most unique offering that Pat has given us, it still is beautiful and it's different enough for me to be able to justify it in my collection. And I know that these colors have been seen before, but I feel as though every brand has the right to come out with their variation of a palette or a color scheme or a color story within a palette or whatever. Just like a fashion brand, every fashion brand has a variation of Kelsee boots. That doesn't mean you have to go out and buy every single one. You just pick whichever brand works best for you, and I feel the same way about makeup. So I'm happy to have that in my collection. I really like it, and I know that I will use it. It is a safer palette, so that means that a lot of people will feel more comfortable using this palette in comparison to some of Pat's other palettes, which had a little bit more color there. So taking all of that into consideration, I think that this palette is beautiful, and I highly recommend it. I love everything about Pat McGrath's Mothership palettes. From the packaging, it just gives an entire vibe, to the formula, because as you guys know, I have very sensitive eyes, and Pat McGrath's eyeshadow formula. It's one of the only eyeshadow formulas that I've never had any irritation occur to me when using it. So I take all of that into consideration when I think about purchasing these palettes, because they are quite pricey, but they are luxury, and I personally think that they are worth it. So let me know what you all think about this palette. Let me know if you all plan on picking it up. I look forward to reading your comments down in the comments section, and I will check you all in my very next video, which will be super soon. Smooches. Bye.